upon us, so I would like to call the meeting to order.
Directors Huang,
Here.
Akbari,
Here.
Sethy,
Here.
Weed,
Here.
and Gunther.
Here. Would Director Weed lead us in the flag?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on, public comments. Public are here. Nope. No public comments. We'll move on then to consent calendar. Would any director like to add anything to the consent calendar?
I will move to add item 5.1 to the consent calendar, please.
I'll second.
I have a comment on 5.1. I'm going to support the item, but I just wanted to make a quick comment when it comes up for the vote. So, move on.
So, leave item 5.1 off?
No, leave it on, but I'll just, if I can, while it's on consent, just make a comment.
Is it seconded?
Do we have a second? Okay.
Now,
Direct, oh, sorry.
would you like to have him make his comment before you vote?
Yeah, we could take the comment now, I guess.
Vote to amend
Yeah.
consent
Oh.
calendar, so we
Yeah,
can have
right.
that
Well,
vote
let's
first.
make the motion to, the vote to amend the consent calendar as requested.
Directors Huang,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Gunther.
Aye. Moving on to comments on the consent calendar now.
Okay. Under 5.1, the purchase of backfill materials, I would ask that we, under this and other basic materials, that we review these contracts with a contingency mode in mind. That one of two ways comes to mind immediately. One is that we currently have a modest reserve or supply of backfill materials that we keep in the backyard. Storing a larger amount is something, since there's no timeline on this contract, we could even do it under this contract. If it's felt that we could maintain a storage of larger amounts of these type of critical materials, that when we do have an extraordinary surge in labor and requirements and work, a lot of volunteer people coming in, that we have the materials in hand to do it. The second is to take a look at the contract, or maybe an amendment, that would give us priority in the incident of a major catastrophe or contingency, because everybody's going to be after those materials, and there's only so much hauling capacity in the system. So it basically comes, one in this case, I think we could, if we had the place to put it, it would be nice, but alternately look at contractual protections. But basic theme, start thinking of everything, all these contracts in the mode of a contingency operations. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Other comments? We have a motion to move the consent calendar as amended.
I'll make that motion. I'll second.
Motion is second. Secretary, call the roll.
Directors Huang,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Gunther.
Aye. Do you want to do the staff presentation first?
No, it's okay. We can just go down the agenda. This is a quick item.
Moving on then, we'll go to 5.2.
Yes, 5.2 involves the authorization of agreement for investment portfolio management services and manager of finance, Mr. Wunderlich, who will present this item.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Shaver. To assist with purchasing appropriate investment instruments, monitoring credit quality of district investments, and achieving a market rate of return, the district has for a number of years engaged with an investment advisory firm to invest that portion of the portfolio that exceeds our near-term liquidity needs. Generally, near-term liquidity needs are managed through investments in the local agency investment fund, which is managed by the state of California, or the California Asset Management Program, which is a joint powers authority of participating public agencies. The district has used PFM Asset Management since 2012 as this investment manager. Given the amount of time since we had surveyed the market, staff recently conducted a request for proposals process. We received a number of qualified proposals, and there is sufficient funding in the budget for this expenditure, and the contract was reviewed with the Finance Committee August 20th of 2019. Authorization of this professional services agreement will assist the district in achieving strategic goal 3, improve the district's financial stability and transparency. By motion, so the recommendation for this evening is by motion authorize the general manager to 1, enter into an agreement for the investment portfolio management services with Chandler Asset Management for a 3-year base term for a total cost not to exceed $300,000, and 2, authorize the general manager to execute up to 2 one-year extensions for $100,000 per year upon satisfactory performance for a cumulative cost not to exceed $500,000 over 5 years. I'd also like to take just a moment to recognize Carlos from Chandler Asset Management, who's here this evening. And we do anticipate that in about 4 months' time, the board will receive a presentation with some suggestions on updates to our investment strategy and investment policy. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Just basically some input. One is the revised rate structure that we're having this time, which I believe is an improvement over the past rate structure. And the second is the modification to the benchmark that we're going to be using going forward.
Yes, certainly that's one of the things we'll be looking at, and I think one of the things we learned through the proposal process is that given that about 30% of our investment portfolio is in corporate bonds or negotiated CDs, we may want to look at a benchmark that includes more than just U.S. Treasury notes to gauge our investment portfolio performance.
And the rate structure, in the past we had a 0.1, I believe, or it was 0.0.
Yeah, so the
0.1%.
The fee schedule is identified in the staff report, and it does start out at 10 basis points, which is 0.1% for the first 25 million of assets under management, but then it declines with additional assets under management. The district currently has about 135 million in assets under management.
And we had a fixed 10 basis point for the entire amount.
That's the current contract, yes.
Thank you.
Just a short comment that Director Weed and I reviewed this in the Finance Committee, and I am satisfied with the change to a new firm. I think it really benefits the district to have new eyes looking at our investment portfolio management, and so I'm looking forward to having you, Chandler, thoroughly go through and come up with some recommendations as to how we can more wisely, manage our investments. That's it.
I have no questions either. We have a staff recommendation.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Secretary call the roll.
Directors Huang,
Aye.
Akbari, Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Gunther.
Aye. 5.3.
Yes, 5.3 involves the authorization of professional services agreement for engineering services for the Driscoll Road Main Renewal Project, and this item will be presented by Mr. Stevenson, our Engineering and Technology Services Manager.
Thank you and good evening. The Driscoll Road Main Renewal Project includes the replacement of the existing 12-inch diameter, 7,400-foot long transmission main in Driscoll Road between Washington Boulevard and Mission Boulevard and a portion on Paseo Padre Parkway in Fremont. This project is part of the district's water main renewal program and will improve system hydraulics, seismic reliability, post-earthquake service restoration, and reduce maintenance costs by replacing the more than 60-year-old existing asbestos cement main. Engineering services are required to complete the design for the new main, including geotechnical investigation and final design drawings and specifications, as well as to provide permitting support and engineering services during construction. There's adequate funding in the current fiscal year capital budget for this expenditure. The project was reviewed with the Engineering and Information Technology Committee on July 17, 2019, and board authorization of these services will help meet the district strategic plan goal 1.1, efficiently manage and maintain our infrastructure to ensure reliability. And so this is the fourth major water main renewal project that we're currently pushing forward on. We expect to complete construction in 2021 on this pipeline. And staff has already completed the preliminary design in-house, but we've developed the scope of services to complete the final design. And also in this scope, we've included services through bidding and construction. So staff's recommendation is by motion, authorize the general manager to execute a professional services agreement with West Yost Associates in an amount not to exceed $425,751 for engineering services for the Driscoll Road Main Renewal Project, Job 21212. I'd be happy to address any questions.
The type of pipe you're going to be putting in and to replace the AC pipe, the asbestos cement?
That's correct.
What type of pipe?
Oh, steel pipe.
Okay. Steel pipe, I was in a recent conference where they made a pitch on, a renewed pitch on acoustic monitoring of pipelines to determine if a leak occurs. And I understand that our ACWD currently has a pilot program looking at acoustic monitors, which are screwed onto fire hydrants and measure the sound in the middle of the night. And if you hear noise, you might have a leak, and the more you have, the easier it is to pinpoint it. But it struck me that reviewing our design criteria to include acoustic monitors, which sometimes there's a company has intelligent hydrants now that they come built in with hydrophones at the base rather than being screwed on at the top, that we look into those type of monitoring of the system on an ongoing basis, that we can then detect major leaks or leak in the system. The AMI will address it on the customer side, but this really goes to what the legislation is for water leaks within the system itself. Thank you.
Sethy?
No, none.
Just a quick question. Will the folks who live in that area, will they experience any disruption of service or any significant noise related to the construction?
Yeah, just pardon me. Driscoll Road is a pretty heavily trafficked road, so there are going to be traffic impacts. It's going to be similar to our Alvarado Niles Boulevard main replacement in terms of traffic impact. So the community will have to deal with the various traffic impacts that will come along with this sort of thing. We're doing what we can to minimize that. In terms of the folks that we're serving along Driscoll Road, there will be intermittent and short outages of water service. We'll be working with folks well in advance of when those occur. Portions of this pipeline will actually have to be removed from service so that the new pipeline can be placed in the exact same alignment, just because of the way that the street's congested with existing utilities. So there will be a temporary water system set up for portions of the pipeline. So, but for the most part, customers' outages along this pipeline for this project will be pretty short.
If I might add one more thought to the process. In the past, I've argued that retaining in place pipelines that could be used as a secondary source for less than potable water may well be a better solution than purple pipe for addressing, which is recycled water, fairly expensive, but taking raw well water or untreated water and putting it through a system, whether the circumstances of this alignment works or not, is another question. But I would hope that we would consider retaining the existing pipe in place. The second element on retaining and not abandoning the asset is that if you have to pull cable, having that conduit can be a very valuable advantage, particularly on a main road.
Yeah, the pipeline, the preliminary design calls for removing only pieces of this pipeline, and the remaining parts of the pipeline would be removed from service but left in place, and they'd be capped and protected in place. There are certain portions that have to be physically removed simply because there's no other place to put the new pipeline along that alignment. But the vast majority of the pipeline would be removed from service and protected in place, pending approval from the city of Fremont.
Now, if you could look at even a conceptual method of maintaining the continuity of that existing pipeline, I think that may be beneficial to us over time.
Mm-hmm. Just as a side note, the board is going to hear in a future workshop that the district's thinking, at least on the staff perspective, on the issue of purple pipe is evolving. So, we can have this discussion as part of that, and I understand that that workshop should be happening in the next few months? October timeframe. So, I think that'll be a good time to kind of talk about these issues in more detail.
Right. Thank you.
I made my comments at the meeting, the committee meeting. Yeah, this is a nasty road construction project. It's going to rival Alvarado Niles. It may beat Alvarado Niles. Thank God I don't drive down there frequently. This is on the flight path to Hopkins
Junior High,
Hopkins
correct.
Junior High, not to mention Mission High. The schools don't use school buses anymore. So we have the same problem going on down the street from me, where we're going to be tearing up the road. And I can't wait. Yeah. This one here as well, if we could do anything at all working with around when the schools let out. I watch daily Alvarado Niles turn into a parking lot for about 1 hour, and then it clears up. It's still bad, but it's not as horrible. Just suggesting. I'm sure staff's already looked at that, but if we can. And the same over in Union City. There's like an hour in the evening where the road doesn't move.
Right. Yeah, same challenge for both projects, and we're definitely, that's certainly a consideration in the planning. Yeah.
Okay, without any more comments, we have a motion.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Secretary, call the roll.
Directors Huang,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Gunther.
Aye. Moving on to action item, committee
Reports.
committee reports.
Staff, as is typical, does not have any additional information about the board committees, but we stand by ready to respond to any questions.
Questions, comments? Hearing none. Operational reports.
I do have some comments.
Operational?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, on items 6.2.4, .5, and .6, I just wanted to illustrate what I was observing here when I was going through the numbers and the graphics. It's just a good reminder to realize that 10% of our customers generate about a third of our income. And so I went back a few years, and during the pre-drought period, our non-residential customers made up about 29% of our revenue. Post-drought, we're at about 31%, and it's a little over 31%, so it's increasing there. And I'd like to ask a question, but not to be answered here at this board meeting, but for Mr. Wunderlich for the Finance Department. Do certain water districts offer differential pricing between residential and non-residential that's in conformance with 218?
Yes.
Okay. I would be interested in having that explained at a future Finance Committee meeting.
Sure, we can prepare a briefing on that.
Okay. And I was not including different diameter pipes and all that kind of stuff. So that was my only comment on that. And then, looks like in August we had our first month in the year where water consumption actually met our demand forecast. First time in the entire year.
Yeah. I would note still less than 50 million gallons a day, which is a little over half our capacity. So we have. I did have a comment, if I might, on we have a report on the total number of meters. However, it strikes me that there's an extraordinary number of meters that are not included in these totals, which are the sub-metering that we're requesting on many of the large projects in each of the individual units. And that tracking that would be helpful to the district in our planning purposes, so because I could foresee the point where we come up with a separate rate structure for splitting the commodity and service charges so that the homeowners associations or apartment managers would pick up the bulk of the cost, and that we'd have 100% variable charges to the individual residents. It would not impact the total number, but it would make it, I think, far more effective and if we're going to use that as a conservation technique to sub-meter individual units. And if we're going to do that, make it 100% volumetric, which would mean no more than 30% would be of the charge would go to, probably less, to the individual residents, and then the master owner, preferably in my mind on the property tax bill, would be charged the bulk of the service charge.
So, Director Weed, just so that I make sure that I understand the request, is the request that staff look at including sub-meters in the annual total meters report?
Yes, that would be,
Okay.
it would be another column that would just give in brackets sub-meters that are not part of our billing system currently, and then over time find a way to evolve into a billing mechanism for those, whether we've charged it or it was charged through the...
Right. So some new development includes accommodations for sub-meters, but we wouldn't necessarily have the data for the actual meters or whether or not they're installed. So what we'll need to do, I think, looking at staff, is take a look at our records and see if we can at least kind of track the number of units that should be sub-meter compatible.
Yeah, and we could ask the property owner to make a report to us of how many they've actually installed or not installed, but that's...
Well, I think what we'll do is we'll take a look at what would be involved in terms of going down that road, and then we'll report back at a committee to see if we're kind of going in the right direction. Okay?
Thank you, yeah.
All right, you're welcome.
Just one other comment on meters. Nope, skip that.
Further comments?
No.
I'd just like to comment again, I'd be remiss if I didn't, the hardness report, nicely done.
Nice job, Kurt.
Moving on.
So staff presentations. Yeah, item 6.3.1, I'll do a little bit of an intro before passing it off to Kurt. As the board knows, ACWD has a history of stepping up to assist when called upon after natural disasters and other large emergencies that seem to occur from time to time throughout the state and sometimes even outside of California. And as general manager, I just wanted to say on a personal note, it actually makes me feel proud that not only does ACWD step up, but we typically have more volunteers of district staff that are willing to do that than we actually are asked to provide. So it's competitive. And so this was one of those situations. And so I'm thrilled that you'll be hearing from staff this evening about their firsthand experiences with the district's participation in emergency response and recovery efforts from the 2018 Camp Fire and Paradise Irrigation District. So with that, I will look at our Operations and Maintenance Manager, Kurt Arens, to see if he has any additional comments before you hear the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Shaver. Yeah, no, this is just an opportunity to, first kind of share the experience, but also to acknowledge the staff and thank staff for their efforts and willingness to help out in these situations. We have a quick introduction by Jake Reed, who's going to give an overview of the events, and then that'll lead into a little first-hand experience. Jake?
Hello, everyone. As you know, my name is Jake, District's Emergency Response Security Officer. Before I begin the presentation, I'd like to thank the board for their support in deploying district employees. I think mutual aid communicates to other agencies and the public that we are willing to help others in a time of need, and mutual aid provides an invaluable real-world learning experience for our employees and therefore increasing our district's preparedness to respond to disasters. This presentation is about lessons learned from Paradise Irrigation District emergency response and recovery efforts through Camp Fire disaster. First, I'll give some background on the disaster, and then I'll talk about lessons learned from an after-action review that was conducted with their Operations and Maintenance Manager. And then it'll be followed by Adam, who'll talk about Nico's and Adam's experiences providing mutual aid within their distribution maintenance division. Paradise Irrigation District system and governance is very similar to our district's, just smaller in scope. Therefore, there were many lessons learned from PID's response and recovery efforts that are applicable to our district. The numbers on this slide help paint a picture of the disaster PID had to deal with. Keep in mind, many of PID's employees live within the utility's jurisdiction, so this disaster affected both the operations of their water utility and the employees' homes and families. Here are some lessons learned from the after-action. Sorry about that. In summary, it couldn't have been much worse for PID. Any of these issues, leaks, pressure, water quality, revenue, all those issues would be extremely difficult for any utility to deal with. PID had to deal with all those issues within the first few days of the disaster response.
Plus losing a few board members.
Yes.
They lost their homes, they had to leave the community.
GM lost his home as well. Many people did. Here are some lessons learned from the after-action review that was conducted with the O&M manager. Many of these lessons learned are common with lessons learned from other disasters, no matter the cause or hazard that created a disaster. In summary, these lessons learned are important areas to focus on while preparing for a disaster, and the lessons learned can be parsed into three particular areas: emergency response, incident command system, and business continuity. After the Cal warrant request came in, as the district typically does, we reviewed the request to see if we could help, but still maintain current operations and be ready for our own emergency response. After many conversations with PID, it was determined that it was best for our district to send Nico Gonzalez for 1 week, followed by Adam Guajardo for another week, to provide mutual assistance in maintaining PID's distribution system. Nico was not able to make it today. I'll now be followed by Adam, who will speak about the experiences both Nico and Adam had working for PID during the recovery phase of the Camp Fire disaster.
Hello. Thank you for having me today. We have some pictures to show you. Nico, I went the first week. Nico went after me. I was more responsible for doing what's called interim water, which is locating where the meter is, removing it, and putting in an apparatus that you'll see in a little bit. That is what I was installing. The back here is just for a stand. It doesn't have water going through it at all. This side here hooks up to the angle stop, and they were having trouble with that because it's a fitted, machined in. So it's not like most water meters have a very flat surface. So with the gasket and the water meter against it, it'll hold and don't leak. But once you put a gasket on a fitted pipe like that, it's really hard to get it to seal up against the angle stop. So when you turn it on, it's spraying everywhere. But I had learned a trick back in the day that if you take a pipe like that and file the end nice and flat, almost like the end of a water meter, then you put the washer in. It works really well. That was something I was able to show them from a trick that I've learned from here, actually, and it worked really well. But that's what we're installing at houses that were burnt out, gone for new construction, and also for houses that made it that needed a water source. You know, their meter, a lot of their meters were plastic, a lot of their meter boxes were plastic. They just kind of melted in the fire, just disappeared. And then also too, with big equipment coming through, just wiped out everything to where you don't even know where the meter was. So it was pretty tricky to find them. This was one that was easy to find, obviously. It was a concrete box. The meter's actually laying right there. And that's what it looks like after we install it. That back piece, like I said, we would put horseshoes on it to hold it down and then just recover it so it wouldn't tip over. And it's just got a little water spigot on the end of it so they could start using their water. Non-potable, just for construction and watering plants. View of more destruction. Everywhere you drive there was just complete destruction. It was really strange though. There would be a house standing in one spot, and next to it, the 3 houses next door are just completely gone. I think he missed one thing, how it moved a football field a second. That's how fast the fire was moving through. So that's really fast. I mean, just quick devastation. It burned out a lot. It's a picture of a flag that made it through. I don't know, it just caught my eye. Kind of got me. Across the street behind, if you're facing that, that was behind you. Someone, their lot was gone, but they put a new flag up. But I just thought that was a pretty cool picture. This also shows how fast the fire moved through. The half that tree just got burnt, singed, gone. Other half managed to stay. When I was there looking around, you could really see like how it went through. It's pretty spooky stuff. I would not want to be there. This is Ethan on the top, taking a little break. It was 106 the first few days we worked. It was really hot. I worked with Brent first over here on the bottom right. We just installed that one, and we were looking for another one. So he's actually looking at a map trying to locate the other meter that we weren't able to find. But one of their guys found it the next day. And then we came back and installed the apparatus that we were installing. Real good guys. Brent has worked there for like 2 years, and Ethan was one of their temps. They hired a bunch of temps in lieu. They lost like half of their employees because they just lost everything, their house, their parents' house, their animals, and it just was too overwhelming, and they just packed up and left. Whatever they had, they took off to start somewhere new, somewhere else, which I can't blame them. A artist from Disney was inspired to come up to Paradise and started doing some art on some burnt out stuff. I think we have another closer up slide. So he did that on a burnt van. I just caught my eye and I thought it was pretty amazing. This gentleman works for the Feather River ICU unit. He's the manager of the ICU unit at the Feather River ICU. He saved, I'm not sure exactly how many people he saved, but he loaded that truck up with people and kept driving back and forth through the fire, saving as many people as he can before it just got to be too much. His name's Alan. I think it's spelled Allyan. And Toyota bought him a new truck for his efforts. He saved many people's lives. Also, Ethan had told me a story how they literally had people in a huge parking lot, and they had helicopters coming, dumping water on them to keep them alive until they can get them out of there. And he said that some of the people said by the time the next helicopter would come, they were just literally getting so hot from the fire that by the time the helicopter got there, it was much needed. On the way up to Paradise from Chico, it's about a 25-minute drive every morning. This is a lookout point, like a vista point where you go and look out. And people put locks on the fence there for some reason. They're all up and down the whole fence. But the view has changed so much, they say, you really couldn't see down below before with all the growth and trees. You couldn't see Chico, but they say now that the view has been burnt out, you could actually see all the way down into town now. But that's like a huge gorge. When you're going up, it's on your left side. When you go back, it's on your right, but it's just a big gorge. And actually, the last one I installed, we were about to leave, and it caught my eye. It was a family of deer all laying down in the bush, and I told Ethan to stop. I want to get some shots of these deers. To me, it was kind of fitting closure that there's life coming back. Not stop.
Before we move on, sure. Before we move on to any questions or the recognition, I'd just like to say, when I was talking to the operations and maintenance manager, Jim, he just could not say enough good things about our utility workers, Nico and Adam. Particular two parts. One is their expertise. A lot of agencies have utility workers that are kind of, one-stop shop. They have like one function. They're not a backhoe operator or a plumber. He was really impressed, especially coming from way over here in an area he's never heard of. They're so dynamic in the expertise they brought. So he couldn't talk enough about that, and he was very grateful to have them for that. And even, I'd say, just as important was them as a people, as a person. It takes a special type of person to go to a different area that's very remote and try to fit into that culture and then provide value. And they just hit the ground running. They were able to fit in, become part of the team, and just help get maintenance moving at a quicker rate. So he's very, very appreciative of Nico and Adam's help.
I'm happy to be able to go. Trust me, because I tried to go to all the other disasters and I wasn't chosen, so this time I was, so I was really stoked.
Maybe questions first? Yeah, do we have board comments, questions?
Well, thank you for your service. It was extraordinary. Paradise, Director Sethy and I had an opportunity to go visit the South Feather River Water District and drive through Paradise, not to visit their facilities. The comments were being made about the AMI system that Paradise had put in and the challenges they had with communication because of the terrain. Following the disaster, was AMI at all, do you know if it was at all operational, and was there any?
I'm not exactly sure, but I do know that all of the cell towers were wiped out completely, so they have these temporary ones. AT&T has these big trucks that put up the mobile temporary cell just to get cell service returned to the city. But as far as that, I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, so the ability, it'd be interesting to talk to their people about any ability to monitor their system, what was active, what was working, what wasn't. But if it was totally wiped out,
yeah,
it may have been a
just
just total
bled
loss.
out, from what I understand, completely.
Thank you.
I'm fine.
I just want to reiterate, thank you for the work that you do and for volunteering to go here. That's incredible. So appreciate you stepping up.
Most of the skills I used up there, I had learned from back in the day in drilling, operating drill rig, and then a lot of the skills I learned right here at ACWD. So really it's full circle, because what I know is what I've learned here, what I've been trained, and they do a good job of training us, I'd say, without a doubt.
I do have a couple of comments and reflecting on this, if I may. As Director Weed pointed out, we were up in Oroville to visit the near completion of the dam, and so we spent a few days up there, 3 days going around, and we took that drive from Chico up to Paradise, and so I could envision in my mind when the fire was occurring how challenging that was to get people out, on that highway, traveling up, the whole grade. Having actually driven around the community, and Director Weed and I visited the Gold Rush Museum, Gold Nugget Museum, where the largest gold finding was made. They had a replica of it.
Yeah, I've seen that on the map today, actually, on Google Maps. When I was
Yeah, they took that down very carefully to the San Francisco Mint to make sure that it was safeguarded. But we saw the football field for the high school, and that was right behind, and it was I think one of the best historical presentations of, the early days of California and the gold rush. And it just seemed unimaginable to me to know, having driven the streets, how that whole community was wiped out. So I do want to thank you for your services. It's really wonderful. And I have one question for Jake. At some point, are you going to be presenting a business continuity plan in a formal way to the board?
After the phase one's completed, we're currently developing it.
Mm-hmm.
After phase one's completed, we're penciled in right now to present the results of that and the approach to develop the plan in February.
Okay, good.
Well, it's pretty amazing that we have volunteers that represent our agency so well. I just found the little things to be special, such as you use the skill you learned about filing down the end of the pipe to make sure that the new connection doesn't leak. I mean, things like that come with experience, and that actually shows how valuable it is for our experienced agency staff to do this type of response. From my colleagues who actually responded to the campfire as part of EPA response court, my understanding is that the working condition is not exactly the greatest. It's the logistic, the temperature, the discomfort that you have to deal with in order to get the job done. I think those are the intangibles nobody ever talks about, just the condition you have to endure in order to perform these tasks. That's greatly appreciated, and thank you so very much for volunteering, for dealing with all the unpleasantness just to help our Valley Water District come back online. So thank you, and please convey our thanks to Ethan also.
I'd like to thank you as well. People don't understand devastation. I got to go up into the Oakland Hills after the fire with the Coast Guard. We got to go home every night. What you guys did up there was absolutely terrific, and I'm sure it'll be greatly appreciated by everybody up there. They may not know who did it, but they know somebody did it. And actually doing it. There was not a plan. It wasn't, a picture. No, it's there. It's on the ground, happening, and you help them recover. Helping our neighbors is so important, and someday we're going to have to ask for it too. Really, no question. Someday we will. So I just want to say I'm very happy, very thankful that you went, and grateful for the district sending people up there. And we do have a letter of appreciation for you. Thanks for coming down tonight.
Oh, you're welcome.
Awesome.
Wait, I think I misspoke. It was supposed to be Nico, isn't it? That one with
It's
him.
Nico.
Sorry, my apologies.
It's okay, we know
You
what
went
you
with
meant.
Ethan, but he was with the other water district. It was Nico, sorry.
Yeah.
On to...
Okay, we have a number of staff presentations and reports this evening. The next one involves an update on the Los Vaqueros expansion project. Activities associated with that project are accelerating, and we thought it would be a good idea for kind of staff to bring the board up to date. There's been a number of task forces created to look at different elements, and the part that I think the board should be most interested in at this point is the governance aspect of this. It's very complex, and you're talking about potentially the launching of at least one new JPA. So if there are strong feelings about JPAs that we've learned in previous experience as part of the startup process, that would also be good for staff to hear this evening. So with that, Laura Heides, our Manager of Water Resources, will provide a presentation that is going to bring you up to date, at least up until a couple of weeks ago, in terms of where the project is currently.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. I'll go ahead and kick it off here with an outline. I'll talk just briefly about an overview of the reservoir expansion project, some funding updates. We'll talk briefly about the independent review of usage fees going on, a little bit about the term sheet development progress to date, and some next steps. And I should say that I'm very thankful to our colleagues at Contra Costa Water District who have provided much of the information in today's presentation through a recent update. So you'll notice that some of the slides have their artwork and logo as well. So just a brief refresher, Los Vaqueros Reservoir is owned and operated by the Contra Costa Water District. It's an off-stream reservoir adjacent to the Delta. It's currently 160,000 acre-feet capacity, and the proposed Phase 2 expansion project would increase that to 275,000 acre-feet. There are a number of different partners involved in the project at the moment, and a number of different benefits that the expansion project brings. I won't go over those in detail since you've heard about those before. The project itself would use existing shared and new facilities for use by all the partners. And as you recall, the California Water Commission in 2018 awarded Prop 1 funding for the project, and that includes an early funding award for some of the current work going on. So I'd like to provide an update on federal funding, and this is information that we recently learned from Contra Costa Water District. As you know, the Water District, or the Contra Costa Water District, has been pursuing federal funding from the WIN Act for this project, and currently the final federal feasibility report is under review, and that is happening back in Washington, D.C., with it going to the Secretary of the Interior for a briefing, and then would be sent by the Bureau of Reclamation to the Office of Management and Budget. And then they, in turn, make a recommendation for, or at that point, there's a recommendation for funding. And then after that, it would be published in the Federal Register if funding is recommended, and it would go to Congress to authorize the funding. The current recommendation that is hoped for is 25% of the capital cost of the project. That's $223 million, and that money would benefit all portions of the project. And additionally, that includes, or the recommendation would hopefully include O&M dollars for the refuge portion of the project, which is water going to wildlife refuges, at $2.6 million per year. And just of note, you may notice 25% of the capital cost. That is the maximum that can be funded through the WIN Act for a state-led project. So that's where that number comes from. And the federal benefits of this project, should they choose to fund it, are the supply for the wildlife refuges, and also it provides Central Valley Project operational flexibility. Let's see. The federal funding would help reduce costs for all participants, and the current financial modeling that's been done for the project does assume that the federal funding would be received, and it's applied across the board to all facilities, so it doesn't go to one thing more than the other, so that's a benefit to all partners. And if federal funding is not received, it was emphasized that local agency partner costs would go up, of course. And one of the things that Contra Costa has requested is that partners be supportive of the USBR's recommendation to the Office of Management Budget to authorize the project for funding, and they're looking at potentially accomplishing this through a visit to DC by local area partner GMs or senior staff to show local support for the project. This is a new concept, as it's a project that's not being federally built, but built by a local state partner. So this is new for the process, and so they're interested in showing the local support for that. In terms of state funding, as I mentioned, the California Water Commission did provide some early funding for the project. This graph just shows that funding is half of the funding is being paid by the California Water Commission, and that is funding that's Contra Costa managed expenditures and also reclamation in kind, but also the local area partner funding that's in there as well. And so that's something that we are participating in, and also through our in-kind contributions of staff time that we're tracking and sharing with Contra Costa. I apologize, this is a little bit hard to see on the slide I'm noticing here, so apologies for that. This is just an overview of the near-term funding schedule for the project, and we're actually right about smack in the middle of this right now. And so you can see that along the bottom it shows the California Water Commission early funding that's being spent right now for the current planning and work that's going on, and then also the multi-party agreement that you'll see there up in the middle towards the top. Of $2.8 million, and that was something that we participated in that was approved by the board earlier this year. So that funding is going toward the current activities, and the multi-party agreement funding they anticipate will run out probably sometime mid next year, so they may be looking to the partners for additional funding next spring. So that's the latest on the funding that we have. The other task going on right now is the independent review of usage fees, and both Contra Costa Water District and East Bay Mud are contributing facilities to the project to make it work for all the partners, and so they have proposed some usage fees for their facilities. An independent review of these proposed fees is in progress and is being led by our very own Manager of Finance, John Wunderlich. And there is a core team of local area partners that are involved in this review in working with a consultant, Bartle Wells, that's been contracted to do the independent review work. Their schedule is fairly aggressive coming up here. So in September, they're reviewing proposed fees. In October, they will be surveying in different industry fee and rate methodologies. And then in November, developing an estimated range of industry alternatives for this. So I won't get into more detail on that, but we have the expert here if there are any questions on that. While that's going on, another big piece of work that is happening that district staff have been involved with as well is that Contra Costa has developed a term sheet for the project and how it would work. A draft was developed. It covered a wide range of different topics, things like organization, the facilities that would be involved, costs, the various agreements that would be needed to make the project work, and the various moving of water and facilities. And you can see on the right is just a very they call it the spaghetti diagram, but it's just a draft organizational diagram of some of the different pieces that would have to fit together to make the project work. So there's a lot of complexity you can see, but at the center of that diagram is what they're proposing in terms of governance, and that is where they are proposing the formation of a joint powers authority. So as Bob mentioned, that's something that, given our own experiences with joint powers authorities, we certainly are interested in feedback on that piece tonight, if there is any. So this, you can see there's a lot going on here, and the district staff and all the local area partners did review the draft in detail and provide a number of comments to Contra Costa Water District. And out of that process, Contra Costa has identified 7 different themes of remaining work based on the comments that were submitted. So you can see here there are things still outstanding to be resolved with JPA formation, administration, and off-ramps for the project, also on facilities, on the cost allocation among the local area partners, on the service agreements and how that would work to connect the partners to the project and getting service through the project. There are state and federal agreements to be explored, some legal and financial provisions, and then also topics related to water marketplace and refilling of Los Vaqueros Reservoir for the project construction. So those 7 different areas, Contra Costa is going to be forming work groups in all of these areas to really tackle the remaining issues. And we anticipate the district staff will be participating in some of this work, or really probably in all areas, including district council will be participating in the legal work group. So next steps that Contra Costa envisions, and we will be involved with many of them, we anticipate, especially over the next few months as they explore the remaining topics in the work groups. So one thing that they're proposing is a joint trip to D.C. to, as I mentioned, show local support for the project, forming the work groups, so we will be involved in that. They're going to be scheduling workshops. They're selecting outside counsel right now as they proceed with developing governance, so I believe that's something our general counsel is participating in. And the usage fee review that we talked about, they're also running different financial model scenarios, developing a refuge accounting tool to look at how the wildlife refuges would receive water and how that would work. And then they're also going to be doing additional operations modeling, and that's another place where we may be involved because some of it does involve SBA capacity or other different exchange scenarios and San Francisco PUC scenarios as well. And then they will, and they do anticipate initiating discussions with DWR as well. So that's the next steps that they have planned. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about the project.
Start here. What is the project that we're just talking about? Does it include the pipeline intertie with the transfer station to Byron Bethany?
Good question. Yes, it does. And actually, you can't see this, all the details of this diagram, but there is one piece that on the diagram that is the transfer Bethany pipeline that would be a part of the project.
Do we have a rough estimate of the cost of the transfer pipeline and the total cost of the project?
You know what, the total cost of the project is about $980 million, I believe in 2015 dollars, the last number I pulled. I do not recall how much, and I did not bring that with me today, the pipeline portion, I apologize.
And that's total cost, but potential cost to ACWD is still very much unknown. You heard this evening that the federal funding that the local partners are seeking is still in progress. If we can land that federal funding, that could reduce the overall cost of the project significantly. And then the other issue is, Laura mentioned off-ramps, and depending on who's participating, does also determine what the cost to ACWD would be. Because if potential partners drop out, then that's less entities to share the cost with.
Okay. Well, this is the third time that ACWD has been asked to participate in Los Vaqueros. We chose not to. The first, with the initial dam construction, we declined on the last raise of the dam. So this is our third shot. I would note that Santa Clara Valley Water District published a document recently which showed their support of the pipeline. and was silent on the support of the dam in their future planning efforts. So it would be interesting to see if the two are severable. I was told by the general manager in the past that they potentially could be severable, and one could invest in just the pipeline, the additional pipeline on transfer, which does bring in new water, and I believe I'm fully supportive of. I still haven't seen the numbers for the dam itself. The next question: a JPA requires all government entities be involved. Are there any private parties that are identified to date that would be beneficiaries of this process and would have to find some type of a government patron to be able to participate?
That's a good question, and I believe all the partners identified to date are all public agencies, water districts, and some of the agricultural water districts that have all joined together through the San Luis Delta Mendota Authority.
Yeah. And for financing, that may be the way to go. BOSCA created a financing authority that was all government agencies, where the county supervisor represented the entities that would otherwise be private, Cal Water and Stanford University. But a public agency, it turns out, with BOSCA, surprises to me, can have private entities as part of it. So in lieu of a JPA, the creation of a new agency to operate this is another government structure that I'm not recommending, but throwing out there as an option. Thank you.
I have a few comments, questions. First of all, let's see, two of us, Director Weed and I, were at the Region 5 event last week up in Oakland at East Bay Mud. And I thought that presentation by Contra Costa on Los Vaqueros was really quite illuminating, because of all the details I personally had not seen before. I think it would be beneficial for all the board members to see those presentations that were presented last week at Region 5.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll make that available.
Oh, I actually requested from Brian Sanders, who organized it, if we could get those sent to us or available somehow, and I think they are going to be put on the Aqua website, so we can definitely get that out.
All right, great. Then maybe our legal counsel can answer this. Do we know who the current law firm is that works with Contra Costa?
Yes. It's Bold Posner, and I can't remember the rest of them, but Doug Cody is their general counsel.
I see. And in the selection process for outside counsel, who are the decision makers on that? Is it Contra Costa or a set of entities?
So it's a legal working group that's been put together of the legal counsels for the participating agencies at this point. Mm-hmm. And so that would include me as your general counsel and a number of other attorneys who are from the agencies that have signed up to participate.
I see.
And the RFP, I believe, is out on the street, and we all work together to put that RFP together.
I know this is really hard to do because there are different conflicts with so many different agencies and legal counsel potentially having conflicts with different parties that they represent. So how are you overcoming that with so many different agencies involved here?
Yeah, so that is something that we've talked about, and we're going to look at it in more detail when we see which firms submit proposals.
I see. Okay. Laura, you have one part of your diagram is on municipal bondholders here. What is that in anticipation of?
That's a good question. Let me see here. I believe they are looking at having some sort of bonds for the project, and so they see them as a stakeholder in the process.
So
municipal bondholders.
Is it proper to envision this being structured this way, that they're getting money that was allocated by the California Water Commission, right?
Right.
They're getting federal money,
Hopefully.
on top of that, for about a quarter. The state was providing almost half?
The thing about what the state is providing, remember, is
Prop 1 funds?
Prop 1 funds, and that's statewide benefit related. So that really kind of pays for the environmental benefits of the project, but all the sort of the water-related benefits need to be funded by the partners that are not, sort of bird sanctuaries.
Right. Okay, so we could end up with a subset of this JPA that's like the Delta Conveyance Finance Authority, and this would mostly be for the capital costs of the project.
Correct. So it's anticipated that the JPA, this newly formed body,
Right.
may issue bonds.
Okay, so not to get anybody too worried here, but if we're participating in one major project on Delta Conveyance and would have to make a financial commitment, we're talking about another very large financial commitment here too.
Correct. And that commitment is to be determined based on the work that remains to be done. And again, all of the partners are very concerned about off-ramps and when they're available, because you want to not be kind of like left standing when the music stops on musical chairs. It's a very dynamic, challenging project to get through.
Yeah. One thing I worry about on the on the financing part, especially in the JPA, is that we could end up with a situation where you have the commitment for the financing to actually obligate yourself to the bonds, and then other people are rushing in after the commitment has been made to try and cut side deals to become beneficiaries of the project, but not responsible for standing up for the financing.
Sort of taking a free ride.
Right.
Yeah, and that's been a topic that's been discussed, and they're looking at a number of strategies to make sure that that nobody gets a free ride. Beneficiary pays is one of the core concepts of the project, and beneficiaries take on the appropriate level of risk as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can I ask, as I was looking at the numbers here, are we looking at about $10 million per 1,000 acre feet of storage?
So I don't think you can.
Conveyance.
I don't think you can look at it in terms of dollars per acre feet of storage, because they have a cost structure and they've got modeling going on that is sort of dynamic, looking at different scenarios and different ways that the cost would be allocated. So I think we really haven't settled on sort of what the dollar per acre foot or dollar per storage is.
Based on the last model run, with a lot of assumptions, because different agencies are in the project for different benefits. For example, you want the reservoir for emergency storage, and you're not planning on using water routinely. If you're in the project in that manner, that's the most expensive water based on a dollars per acre foot basis. But ACWD staff is also looking at, from a business case perspective, what's the best way to leverage the project. So looking at more of an annual water use kind of scenario. And I can tell you, based on the last modeling run, we were down around, $400 or $500 an acre foot.
Okay. But it strikes me you have a $1 billion project in round numbers. You're going to create 100,000 square feet of additional storage. That comes out to, my numbers, $10 million per 1,000 acre feet. Semi-tropic looks like a really good deal when it comes to storage cost. What we're talking about. So,
But Director Weed, you are factoring that as in a one-time scenario.
no, once there's storage.
Yeah, but there's the life of the reservoir.
And you know, higher maintenance costs, the extraordinary maintenance and operational costs, and also the maintaining of the pipeline to come to and from it.
Well,
it'll be interesting to take a look at the numbers and how you do your analysis, but in rough terms, it strikes me that this is coming in around, my numbers are correct, and I haven't missed a decimal, For every 1,000 square feet of, $1 billion to create 100,000 square feet of additional storage. It could be operational in warehouse, but I look at Del Val at a small fraction of that cost. It's already built, and I'm bewildered, but thank you. Well, I'm sure it'll be cleared.
Why don't you calculate out the millions of acre feet over the life of the...
I'm talking about the amount of
reservoir.
storage, the capacity of our storage.
There will be millions of acre feet of water handled through that reservoir.
Right. It's capacity we're looking at, yeah.
That's the proper numerator you need here.
Well, staff will be back with more and more refined cost information as the project progresses. And, you know, our job is to provide you with as much clarity as we possibly can prior to the district making any commitments.
I think there were similar costs related when the first two times when we chose not to participate. So, thank you.
Comments?
So just a quick note. So definitely Los Vaqueros is a good idea because we do need local supply that does allow us operational flexibilities that we currently do not have. But on the flip side is the cost. Right? I know we probably beat this one to death, but we need an off-ramp and we need a business case. In principle, I think it's a great idea, but we cannot always afford all great ideas.
Right, and I should also add that it's going to be especially challenging to provide the board with the amount of information that I know that you would want to see, because there's other variables that come into play too that have nothing to do with Los Vaqueros, such as State Water Project and the Conveyance Project, what's going on with the voluntary settlements with San Francisco Supply, and now SB1, which is very volatile. So we're going to do our best to provide you with as much complete information and as much context as we can. But I'm sure that, well, my crystal ball is showing that you're going to likely be frustrated when it comes time to make these big decisions because of the clock that's required for the state funding, you know, for the state bond funding for Los Vaqueros, because it might be the first project that becomes ripe. But we're going to do our very best to try to help you through that process.
Just make sure there's adequate off-ramps or at least detours, perhaps.
Right.
Yeah, because I was wondering, you actually read my mind, I was wondering how Los Vaqueros would play into the State Water Project, because technically it's the same river.
Yeah, and everything is interrelated.
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I wish I had comments. This is complex, and I'm sure you'll be back. It's going to be expensive, regardless. Anytime anybody tries to build or raise a dam today, we're talking about an extra pipeline in here, Byron Bethany, that we have to have if we're going to be in. It certainly would benefit us, but we'll have to see the cost.
Yeah. And so much of it depends on what the other partners do or don't do as well. So to be continued.
Certainly. Where's the general manager's reports?
Okay, thank you. We'll start with a brief report on the Hidden Valley Tank project.
Well, it's just a note to let you know that we have one of our public information tent events coming up in advance of our project to do some improvements up at the Canyon Heights Tank. And that will be held on October 3rd, that's a Thursday, from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. And we'll have our tent set up at the Vallejo Mills Elementary School.
And we'll be sending additional information to the board.
Yeah, we'll send you the same notice that we send out to the community, which will be fairly shortly.
Okay, great.
So Director Akbari and I were there with you recently. What is the anticipated work that is being presented to the community?
So we'll talk about the work at the tank site. That's going to include recoating the tank, making a number of improvements at the tank site in terms of safety for employees and so forth, but also improvements at the booster station down the hill. We'll talk about the benefits of that project to the community, including reliability of the tank, providing service to the community, and also protecting the water quality of the water served in the area.
What's the date on that again?
October 3rd, 4:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m.
I won't be here.
Oh.
I'd love to make it.
We'll miss you then.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, we do have a couple more items, at least, under GM reports. Ms. Heides wanted to provide the board with a brief update on the water efficiency master plan.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. We just wanted to make the board aware, I know you're aware of the water efficiency master plan in progress, but we have a customer survey that will be taking place as part of that project. So, and that's one of the next steps we'll be working on. It'll be done with a professional firm via phone and email. And the goal is to be surveying the customers about the saturation of low-flow fixtures and devices and the level of adoption of different water efficiency measures that customers have taken. And so we just want to let you know that the questions are currently in development, and we anticipate the survey taking place either late October or sometime in, late September or sometime in October. And so we'll go ahead, similar to what we did for the previous customer survey, and provide a copy of the questions to the board, so in case you get any questions out in the community. And we will also be putting a smaller, simpler survey up on our website with just a few questions so that anybody in the community who wants to take part in the survey can participate. So that should be coming soon.
Okay. So the next item involves a report, well, first I'll show you some hardware. We received this from the American Water Works Association, recognizing ACWD's membership in the organization for 75 years. So we're a pretty long-standing member of the AWWA. I'll just pass this around so you can take a look at it. And then, while you do that, I will cover the next item on the agenda. Yes?
How long has AWWA been around?
Oh, I should know the answer to that, but that is a Google search away.
I was just curious.
Yeah, well, I'll ask one of my staff members to see if they can answer that while I boot up the next
I think it goes back to the early part of the past century.
I think my guess is they've almost been around as long as ACWD has.
Google tells me 1881.
1881.
Yeah.
Okay. So apparently it took us a few years to become a member, but once we did, we've been a member for the last 75 years. So the board has expressed interest in the N3 Cattle Ranch property, which is actually an amazing piece of real estate that has recently come on the market. And what I thought was I would provide you with some background information, some potential aspects of the site that might be of interest to the board, and then kind of just open it up for directors to kind of talk to each other. Staff has really no intent to pursue this property acquisition at this time, but obviously with the board's input, our thinking about that may change. But first I just wanted to make sure that everybody is kind of working off of the same information.
I don't want to scare Mr. Wunderlich, but we could make an all-cash offer.
We can tell you what that would mean in terms of rates. I anticipated that, and John's staff was good to go ahead and do some calcs. So the property is relatively close to Livermore in the sort of a lot of it is in the Lakedale Val watershed. It's a huge piece of property, over 50,000 acres covering an 80 square mile area. It's not all contiguous. It's got a little bit of a checkerboard kind of aspect to it, so there are holes in it. But it is the largest piece of real estate currently on the market in California, and it is larger in area than the city of San Francisco. It's offered at $72 million. It kind of spans 4 counties. It has one main residence on site. There are 14 hunting camps located throughout the property, all with cabins and, as they call it, skidding sheds. It is enrolled in the Williamson Act, so what that means is that through collaboration with Alameda County, they pay a reduced property tax. And because there's no conservation easements on the property currently, that's considered a positive thing by property owners typically, because the property isn't encumbered with restrictions that otherwise would exist. It's currently being ranched with cattle, and based on the marketing information for the property, it has various levels of supporting cows and calves or stockers. On the site is 200 miles of maintained roads as well. So my understanding is that there are 2 sisters that own the property. They live in Southern California. I have heard, but I have not confirmed, that they are the heirs to the Wrigley family fortune, or at least a part of it. And they have decided that they really want to get out of this particular endeavor, and they're hoping that the property sells as one complete transaction. It's eastern Alameda County and other counties. The property itself is relatively beautiful. This is the headquarters area where the house is and some of the livestock facilities are. You've got steep canyons and hills. It goes up. There are hills over 3,000 feet in elevation, quite expansive. Staff has overlaid the property on a map that depicts the various watersheds in the area. So what you can see here is it overlays the Del Val watershed, and a lot of the land is upstream of the reservoir itself. Part of the property also overlays the Upper Alameda Creek watershed, which really is probably more of San Francisco's interest, because that, even though Alameda Creek does not flow directly into Calaveras Reservoir, there is a diversion dam and a tunnel, so San Francisco takes most of the flow and puts it in Calaveras Reservoir. Some of the property overlays the Arroyo Mocho watershed, which flows directly into Niles Canyon.
If I could make a quick comment here. I don't know how many people have done this, but, every few years, if I have somebody I want to show off, what real California looks like, I take them to the top of Mount Hamilton, where the observatory is, and you can take that road right through this property. It's one of the most beautiful valleys in California, honestly. Right. And Mines Road follows the back part of Lake Del Val all the way up to an intersection with that road, and you can take that road straight into Patterson, California. And during apricot season, it's a wonderful time to go, because when everything is in bloom in the spring. But that valley is truly an extraordinarily beautiful valley, and when you go in there in the winter, the landscape is all covered with snow, and it's just beautiful.
What's interesting is if you have the time, I didn't have the internal fortitude to do this myself, but at this board meeting, there is a video, a professional video that has been created for this real estate offering. That's easy to find. Just search for N3 Ranch. It's narrated by Sam Elliott.
Oh, really? Wow.
And if you, I warn you though, if you watch that video, you're going to want to buy this property because it's extremely well done. It has aerial drone footage. You've got the perfect cowboy voice narrating what the property is about.
Yeah.
I was not going to show the board that.
Too much of a tease.
Yeah. In terms of the watershed areas, how it plays out is, again, most of the property is in the Lake Del Valle watershed. And then, secondly, Upper Alameda Creek. Well, I'm sorry, Arroyo Mocho, Upper Alameda Creek. So San Francisco PUC staff from them indicated to me that they're looking at some of this because of the Calaveras watershed. And our calculation shows that theoretically they should be interested in something less than 10,000 acres, 5,600 acres.
I do have a question. I thought there's a water diversion on Arroyo Mocho.
I don't know.
Huh. I seem to remember a while back there was installation of an inflatable dam. It's maybe more than 10 years ago.
Okay.
So there might be a water diversion, which also means that we might not get as much water from that runoff, right?
Right. So this just depicts the watersheds again with the property overlay and the pie chart showing the color coding of the pie chart matches the color coding of the watershed. So why would ACWD possibly be interested in this real estate? I tried to think of several aspects, and one of them was water rights. For example, could ACWD's water rights be negatively impacted by another entity purchasing this property and then somehow using more water than what they currently use, which is basically for stock ponds, some minor water use. And so staff consulted with our water rights attorney, who basically concluded that any water use upstream of Del Valle would be considered junior water rights than the Del Valle reservoir has already. So we're not really that concerned about that. So if somebody constructed a new reservoir upstream or something like that, they would basically have to not injure the water rights that currently are enjoyed by the Del Valle reservoir.
Quick comment. Dick Quigley, a director in Zone 7, told me that it was his understanding that the Zone 7 had specifically purchased the water rights for much of that.
So both ACWD and Zone 7 have a water right to in Lake Del Valle of 7,500 acre-feet each, 15,000 total. And so that should not be negatively impacted. Zone 7 has also purchased about 5,000 acres of property, both immediately on one embankment and another embankment of kind of like both sides of Del Valle Reservoir. But I don't know if they got significant water rights with that. As far as I know, the water rights in the reservoir themselves remain unchanged.
I pushed mine. He thought there was a separate transaction that took place some time ago on the part of Zone 7.
Okay.
So something to look into.
So we've only done just a brief look into this. There is one unknown, and that is back in the 1920s, there was a law that allowed the State Department of Finance to allow people to file applications for water rights, and many of those applications ultimately became the projects that are now like the State Water Project and so forth. So we've asked the attorney just to take a quick look and see if any applications have been filed for this particular area, just to make sure that we're not missing anything significant. and we should have that information soon. And since then, the State Water Resources Control Board now holds all of the filings that were made. So that responsibility has transferred from the Department of Finance. Other potential interests that ACWD would have involve, watershed protection. This reservoir, this property is a large portion of it is in the Del Val Reservoir watershed. I don't know if the property developed or something like that, they would have to mitigate for any potential water quality impacts downstream these days. And frankly, Del Val is not a pristine water reservoir. They allow power boats and other activities that probably, if it was built today, wouldn't be permitted as a water supply reservoir. In terms of another potential benefit or use by ACWD, probably one of the more interesting possibilities is the establishment of a conservation or a mitigation land bank. So if we had a mega project that we needed to mitigate for, we could potentially use this property as a land bank. That has its pros and cons associated with it. Typically, with these kind of sort of land bank transactions, the state requires really a promise to fund maintenance in perpetuity. So it's like a trust that you have to fund up front because they don't trust that the responsible parties will maintain the property in the future. So that can amount to a huge cost. It encumbers the property if you do that, so it reduces the value of it on fair market value. And then I think, and we've made some just grand assumptions, but if this property was owned by ACWD, there would be significant O&M costs and staffing required to manage it, being such a huge area. It could be offset, perhaps, by leasing for grazing and those kind of activities, but still would require ACWD staff to manage and oversight, to provide oversight.
If I just might make a quick comment here, there are business models available from other water districts that do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And a few come to mind, but right away, Marin Municipal Water District is a perfect example, and their ratepayers support it, covering a vast watershed all the way up to Mount Tamalpais,
right.
And all the resources and the management of it.
Mm-hmm.
But other districts do it too.
Mm-hmm. It would be new for us.
Right.
There has been previous studies performed about potentially increasing the reservoir size or providing a secondary sort of upper Del Val reservoir, and that specific alternative was evaluated in 2009 by CDM for the 3 South Bay Aqueduct contractors. And at that time, CDM also looked into the other categories of potential future water supply storage that that you know very well, like Los Vaqueros expansion, Sites Reservoir, Temperance Flat Reservoir, Bay Area Regional Desal Facility, Delta Diablo Desal, and expanded semi-tropic. So of these alternatives, the district did participate in the expanded semi-tropic, which involves pump back of groundwater into the State Water Project, and then that allows the district to take additional water that otherwise would be going down to semi-tropic. At that time, they were evaluating what they felt was the most viable size reservoir, pretty small, 15,000 acre feet, and it had low yield, only 900 acre feet per year. And then at that time, in 2009, associated with that, if you want to look at dollars per acre foot cost, pretty expensive. So that alternative was dropped in terms of a viable future project for the district based on what they were looking at that time. The Los Vaqueros and Semi-Tropic were pretty much considered, sort of the best alternatives for us, and it makes sense because we participated in Semi-Tropic and we're kind of in the thick of evaluating Los Vaqueros now. There was some inundation, which might be this N3 property if that was constructed. And they also looked at another alternative of putting a dam mid-reservoir in the existing Del Val, and the idea was to try to protect the recreational facilities where you could do additional storage upstream of that. Those costs were, I think, even more expensive than what we were looking at, like significantly, like $105,000 an acre foot for the water supply. So that alternative wasn't evaluated any further at that time. Other issues, I mentioned that San Francisco is evaluating a portion of the property. I don't know what the status of that is now and whether or not they plan on actually pursuing that. I've spoken with the general managers of both Zone 7 and Valley Water. Both agencies are not actively pursuing the property now, although I can tell you that at least on the Zone 7 front, their board president and general manager have discussed if some sort of consortium develops to look at that purchase of the property, then they would want a seat at the table because they have interests. But as Zone 7, not pursuing it on its own by any means. One entity that's been named that could conceivably lead such a consortium is East Bay Regional Park District. My understanding is they've been having discussions with others, although they have not reached out to ACWD. One thing to keep in mind is the Del Val Reservoir is owned and operated by the Department of Water Resources. So if ACWD did have any plans to do anything with the reservoir, including, remember, we looked at the potential reoperation of the reservoir, and we did that Ford study, and reached out to East Bay Regional Park District, and there's not a lot of interest on their part in terms of relocating their camping park facilities. But at this time, DWR hasn't been approached. And then the big wild card is, what does the ACWD board think about all this? And as a board, is there anything that you would like staff to do or not do, given sort of what this opportunity, I guess you'd call, is that's just kind of landed out there? As I mentioned, in discussing with the other South Bay Aqueduct general managers, the general managers themselves were not actively pursuing this at this time. I do have some additional information depending on what kind of questions come up, but I just wanted to stop here and allow the directors on the ACWD board to talk amongst each other to see if there's any sort of common ground that staff should hear about. So that's just a big enchilada being thrown the board's way.
I will mention that Director Weed and I were yesterday at the Alameda County Special Districts Association meeting, and hosted by East Bay Regional Parks District, with the general manager giving a nice presentation along with the board president, Ann Weiskamp. And she expressed multiple times interest in acquiring this property. The general manager didn't say anything proactive, but he wasn't discouraging it either. Mm-hmm. But Ann said that there's interest on the part of a number of their board members to pursue this.
I think she also commented that they were approaching foundations to see if they could get support. Okay. Quick comments. I keep going back to the future. There was a time when water agencies, starting with Crystal Springs, realized that owning large amounts of land and watershed was an inherently valuable thing to have, particularly if you could justify it and afford it. The wealth of Crystal Springs and San Jose Water and other enterprises, both public and private, San Francisco in particular comes to mind, with 38,000 acres in southern Alameda County and no restrictions. That's a huge wealth, and it will only grow over time. It's second that it's better for the water agencies rather than a park district to have ownership of the basic land. You can have park districts as tenants, but to have them as an owner can be a real trouble. We found that in what happened in Dumbarton Quarry and also Del Val more recently, when they get involved. Some of the studies we've looked at, particularly the CDM study, what I believe was flawed in the sense that they put artificial constraints on them when they looked at what the capacity was for the ability to use the reservoir. It was their assumption and presumption that the visitor center could never be relocated. It was built near the bottom of the reservoir and would have to remain there. We had proposed relocating it and creating up to 50,000 acre-feet of additional storage for a cost of about $100 million, which went to the Park District, or $2 million an acre per 1,000 acre-feet. The proposal for the additional dams, particularly the one above Del Val, would address some of the flood control issues. The Ford report relied on, I believe, another Ford logic, and that the excessive flood protection being provided currently by a dam, Del Val, which is built to 112,000 acre-feet at its crest, and we're only getting 15,000 acre-feet of usable water, which is our local water runoff rights, the state not using it, offers an extraordinary opportunity. They set the glory hole at 77,000 acre-feet of storage level because it would have flood out, one, the bridge at the back, which would have to be rebuilt and relocated if they raised it to 90,000 acre-feet, and it would inundate part of the N3 ranch. They didn't want to take that on. So acquiring the entirety of the N3 ranch is not necessary from a water supply standpoint, but merely the several hundred acres that would be inundated if they were to expand the Del Val Reservoir. It strikes me that that is something we should focus on and look at just in that isolated area. San Francisco is going to be looking at spending $1 billion to compensate for the unimpaired flows on the San Joaquin River, and spending that in the East Bay, whether they raise Calaveras or do some other projects. So there's a lot of money out there, including other entities. I would hope that we not walk away from this, that we try and think in the longer term, that the South Bay contractors recognize that this is important, but it's a state project. The state of California should be taking an active role in looking at it, making part of the Bay Delta solution. And secondly, the South Bay contractors at one time debated whether they should acquire the South Bay Aqueduct to assure its operation and maintenance, and this would fit well into that mode. When we look at comparative water cost, we're spending $200 to $1,000 per 1,000 acre-feet at Semi-Tropic. We're looking anywhere from $2 to $5 million per 1,000 acre-feet with Del Val. In the current arrangement, this would probably be less if we properly structured it, because you can get a far more efficient use if you address the flood control and could maintain the water year-round at the 40,000 acre-foot level where they built their visitor center that gets flooded out every 10 to 15 years. Keep our quarry pits filled year-round and not have to worry about many of the other diversion issues. So hopefully we can get the state involved and look at it. We don't necessarily need the entirety of the unit, but it would be nice if we did, or there's somebody, public agency, was a water type agency, WWR, that had control of it and had the park as a tenant rather than as an owner. Because they will be, it's like dealing with the Endangered Species Act. There's no, economics make no sense and are ignored. They have a different, they answer to a different set of standards and morals. But good, but I think it's cost effective. Los Vaqueros is $10 million per 1,000 acre feet. This is $2 to $5 million per 1,000 acre feet, and semi-tropic was $200,000 per 1,000 acre feet. Those numbers, 50-fold difference in the range, are worthy of taking some real consideration as a group. And we don't have to be the sole carrier of this bucket of water. Thank you.
Okay. In the interest of time, because I'd like to take a break, I'm in general agreement with Director Weed's comments. We've actually had quite an extensive discussion about this offline, just the two of us. So I agree with most of what you're pitching here. I think we need a little bit more time to think things through, but there's also a sense of urgency, because you have billionaires out there that could easily, sweep this up.
Its property was advertised in the Wall Street Journal, I believe.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a good network of realtors out there, pitching the property. But, so there's a little bit of sense of urgency. I wonder whether it might, and I'm just throwing this out there as an idea, I wonder if it might be worthwhile having a little brainstorm session where we bring together the water agencies that might have an interest, like San Francisco, Zone 7, Santa Clara, ourselves, and just sit down and have a brainstorm for an afternoon. What's possible here? What could be done? Really think out of the box. And as Director Weed is pointing out, I would much rather have the Park District as a tenant and have the land under ownership of water interests. So maybe there is some consortium that could come to fruit here. But we would have to move quickly. And like I mentioned in the last meeting, it doesn't hurt to put an option to buy on the property or a portion of the property where we might, have an interest.
Well, let me two quick we could throw Bosque into the mix, but if we have a project that we could conceive, eminent domain or threat of eminent domain is an advantage to anyone on the sale of a property, because you get advantages when it comes to the reinvestment of the proceeds. And particularly for that critical portion of the land that would be inundated if we were to develop the water supply systems that were contemplated in the 2009 CDM report, published in 2009, written about 2006.
Last comment, I would ask that staff kind of scout out DWR to see if there's what interest they might have, if anybody's talked about it, if it's on their radar. I'm not sure who the right person is there, but I think that could help us out too.
We have some contacts. We can find out what they think about this, because the DWR is hugely important. It's great to have ideas in a vacuum, but ACWD is not, a player.
Right.
And, we can be part of a consortium or something like that, I suppose, but we can't make anybody do anything. Well, I have no problem reaching out to them.
Well, I took it upon myself to do a little bit of research on the N3 property after our last meeting when it was brought up. Because prior to that, I wasn't quite aware of the opportunity here. And I think this is still one of those times where I kind of defer to my colleagues on the left and right. I'll keep my comments quite brief, actually. I like the idea of potentially going in with a consortium if there's a valid business case, but other than that, I don't have too much more to add to the conversation at this point.
So first a question. You referenced, Mr. General Manager, that our finance department has pushed the calculator button. So what exactly is the impact to the rates?
So, assuming a cash purchase, it would require a significant short-term rate increase.
Okay, which is?
So, as you know, our base rate increase in our long-range planning model is 3% a year. So it would require an additional 7% for 2 years. So you'd be looking at, with a cash purchase, because our reserves would go well below our benchmarks, even doing that.
And that's only for the land. That does not include development of needed facility, assuming we could do that and the annual and that, correct?
Actually, that's a great question. We assumed $2 to $3 million a year in annual maintenance, O&M. That might be optimistic because of the 200 miles of roads, and I could easily see spending $1 million just after one really major storm event, and then some staffing.
So I will be very honest in saying that I love the idea of preserving open spaces. I love the idea to having destiny in control of our own source water. However, this price tag is just way out there. In order to make this work for this district, we have to contingent on the approval and goodwill of the Department of Water Resources. East Bay Regional Park has to be willing to relocate its facilities, and they have already told us no, hell no, multiple times that we tried.
They're not an owner, they're a tenant.
So for East Bay Regional Park District, the acquisition of the property does not require them to do anything.
Right.
But then you would just have
Right.
land.
In order to build a facility to increase our water supply, we do need your cooperation.
And my recommendation would be you're looking at other significant costs that are much less expensive in terms of alternatives to water supply. You know, developing this valley as an additional water supply based on the work that CDM has done is hugely expensive.
So beside the work on CDM, right, so let's look at what's a benefit to the district. There are some that potentially could come to fruition that requires a lot of other pieces that needs to happen where we have no control whatsoever over. And having ownership of that property, not just the roads, the O&M, the erosion, the fire protection, there's potential issue with Endangered Species Act. There are questions as to can we even use this property in any way, shape, or form. The worst case scenario is this district would end up holding a piece of property that we have to protect and care for perpetuity, and we cannot use it the way we would like to do in our vision.
Director Huang, it doesn't have to be used just for water. Water districts do provide recreation as well.
And I am going to get there. We as a district have demonstrated that we are not really good at being landowners. We have tried to lease our property out, and we have decided at some point in time that we're going to get out of that business because it didn't work out too well for us. There is no reason for us to pick up yet even bigger parcel to try to be a landowner and try to enforce all the rules, make sure everything is in shape, comply with the fire code. That was one problem we had. It is a liability that we don't need. It's a cost that we really don't need to spend. We could spend that money somewhere else. We just talked about Los Vaqueros today. We have the State Water Project. We're on the hook for potentially two very expensive projects. Do we really want to put an option on yet another very expensive project with, I would say, equally complex and numerous strings and contingencies that we don't really need at this point in time? Yes, there is talk about perhaps buying just a portion of the property, but we have heard that the landowners feel fairly strongly that this comes as a whole. We just need a little chunk of it, right, in order to do our project.
Bingo.
There's no reason to buy the whole thing. If the landowner refused to sell you the entire property, why are we still putting money on options when they so clearly says we're selling this as a whole?
No, they didn't say that. That is desirable, but that's not a requirement. That's why San Francisco is looking at 5,000 acres.
Right. However, do we want to put options and put money on the table on something that the seller said we'd rather not do? Right? There is a, how do we spend our customers' money? How do we spend it wisely? It's a great vision. I agree. In the ideal world, perhaps. But we have way too many obligations. This is just
That's
not
why
something we
the-
should take on at this point in time.
Director Huang, that's why we should look at a consortium and pull people together for a brainstorm session.
So let's talk about the concept of the consortium. So potentially it would be San Francisco, it would be South Bay Aqueduct contractors. We have heard from them that they are not interested in this project. However, if somebody is forming a consortium, they might be interested to have a seat at the table. What that translates to is ACWD will have to take the lead. Our staff has to spend the time. Our staff is already pretty maxed out in terms of what they are doing. Are we hiring new people just to run this project? That is not cost effective, and there is no business case to do that.
Director Huang, I believe that you are jumping to a conclusion on conclusions that have not been made by other parties. You're really making some assumptions here.
I am, because
When-
this
and-
project is so vague at this point in time. We are all working on assumptions. You're assuming things will happen. I am assuming things might not happen. So I think we're all making assumptions, and I will respect your position. And I do feel strongly, in my personal point of view, that it is not cost effective at this point in time for our customers to pick up this cost when we have other pieces of puzzle out there that require very large financial commitments from this water district.
Okay.
And it's commitment we need to make. We need that water from State Water Project.
I have a request to staff, which I think would help us all out here. Could we get an overlay like you had here, but one of the Alameda Creek watershed with this property? Because I know that a large part of this property goes into Stanislaus County. It's covering 4 counties. But if we had a better understanding of...
The Alameda Creek watershed goes to the other side of Mount Hamilton, almost into Santa Clara Valley. I believe I have seen that map provided by our old people, Alameda Creek Alliance. They actually had a really good map.
So this whole area is the Alameda Creek watershed. And you've got sub-watersheds that go to the various local creeks, the tribs. So in terms of just, Alameda Creek itself, Upper Alameda Creek, you can see what property overlays the Upper Alameda Creek watershed here. And, that's about 5,400 acres. Arroyo del Val, eventually finds its way to Alameda Creek and Niles Canyon as well. So the only area that is not in Alameda Creek watershed is the property extending to the north above the thick boundary line there.
Yeah.
And we've calculated that at being 13,000 or so acres. As you can see here in this chart, we've got the outside Alameda Creek watershed, and it's that gray area.
Okay. Yeah, what's the portion that San Francisco's interested in?
Well, it's a little bit of a mystery because just in an informal discussion with their staff, they said they were looking at about 10,000 acres. But when I look at what our staff took a look at, looks like, about 5,600 acres or so either go into potentially Calaveras Reservoir, and only 200 acres finds its way to San Antonio Reservoir.
San Francisco has an interesting philosophy of owning their watershed, and I think it's commendable. But where there is a distinction, and that is that when we look at Los Vaqueros or Del Val, that we're looking at a place to park transferred water, not local runoff. And if you're doing your basis on, and that should be the analysis. You're building, acquiring storage that you can park and manage and supply water to your system. Del Val is in a much better location than is Los Vaqueros from the standpoint of our district, given the interties and the connections.
So just, if I may, there's no, based on what information we have now, there's no significant storage opportunity in this property.
If you assume a couple of things, one, that you have to maintain extraordinary overcapacity for flood control.
That's different. That's within the Del Val Reservoir itself. So just to remind the board, I thought this might come up. This is a simplified cross-section of Del Val Reservoir.
Yes.
So
not to scale.
Not to scale, but it does show that a large portion of the reservoir is dedicated to flood control.
Yes.
The only way to reduce that we're aware of and that was evaluated in the Ford report was through the use of advanced, not approved yet, weather forecasting techniques. You can take advantage of the flood control capacity and kind of cheat on the flood curves that they have to operate by. And then you could see that East Bay Regional Park District facilities on this cross-section would get flooded. So to use that flood control storage space, you'd have to work out some sort of arrangement with East Bay Regional Park District, and they have said not no, but heck no to relocating any of their facilities.
Yeah.
Plus, they have the right, because the reservoir's original construction was dedicated 50% water supply, 50% recreation.
They have a lease that ends in 2024. Did not define a specific amount or level. The amount of flood control storage here is a default, and I would think is far excessive of what was needed. Now, we can talk about whether that might be marginally improve it, but that's another element.
So the point I just wanted to make is that is a different issue than the potential property acquisition.
If you had the flood, the upper Del Val Reservoir dam, a new dam, you could keep the water level at where that gray hash mark is, where we currently have at its full capacity year-round, because that would take up the flood control storage, and you could keep this and manage this at 40,000. I would argue you could raise it all the way to 77,000 if you had an adequate flood control structure immediately upstream of the reservoir. That's an extraordinary capacity at a small fraction of the cost of what we're talking about with Los Vaqueros, which is also a place to park transfer water.
Yeah, and we haven't thoroughly evaluated the feasibility of constructing a completely new dam and a new reservoir upstream of Del Val.
Okay.
But what I can say is that when CDM evaluated this, 15,000 acre feet was the big size that they looked at, based on the configuration of the canyon.
And
So
their
it's not huge.
presumption that they could not relocate any park facilities, and they were limited to the 15,000, including
And that's
the
a
intake
pretty good
at the bottom of the
presumption.
groundwater
That
level.
is a really, so in the interest of moving this along, I think you heard our point of view. I just want to say, to build a new dam in California is pretty darn difficult. I just look at how long sites and temperance flats took, even expansion of Los Vaqueros. I, for one, personally would say I will have problem telling our ratepayer that I am going to increase your rate by another 7% with no guarantee for additional water supply, no guarantee for additional benefit to you, and any time frame that you could think of. and no guarantee anything would happen to it. In fact, I might end up have to keep on paying O&M costs for things that may or may not happen. I just don't have it in my heart to do that. I know other directors have very different opinions, and I do respect that, but you know, I definitely very strongly that I don't think is a wise use of our customers'
So
money.
what I suggest, I'm getting a sense, and I know the board president hasn't opined yet, but
split.
I get a sense that we have a split board here. So there may be some things that staff can do sort of in the interim period. Well, number one, the question I would have for the board is we developed a 5-year strategic plan, so we've got all this stuff that we're working on, and the question is, does this opportunity, this 50,500 square foot property that's on the market, does that change our strategic plan? Because it would be a huge project to take on, and I personally, I don't have the resources kind of to deal with that right now, given what's on our plate already. But I think what we do have the resources to do is certainly reach out to the sellers and ask them, you know, what's the possibility of slicing and dicing this thing up, just to get some real feedback, because basically my sense of it wanting to be one continuous property sale is based on the Sam Elliott narration in a very nice video. The second thing we could do is reach out to DWR, see if they have any opinions about this. The questionable thing is if the East Bay Regional Park District would like to set up a brainstorming meeting or a planning meeting, that's fine. If the board wants me to set something like that up, you know, I think I'd need some additional guidance. Is this something that we want staffs to get together on, or directors? So that third element, the brainstorming session about what we might do or not do, I think I would need some additional guidance on really how much interest is there in that, because, you know, the big question is, where are we going to go with this? And the question on the plate right now is, in my view, and with all due respect, Director Weed, the question on this plate is not, can we make decisions about future reservoirs or that, because we just don't have enough information, and frankly it would take 6 months to a year to develop even something conceptual at this point. But really, what are the potential benefits of acquiring some or all of this property, either alone or with others, and is that something that, is there anything that we need to further vet to determine whether or not that's something that ACWD wants to take a serious look at?
Can I suggest that building on the CDM report, that one of the options you should look at is acquiring anywhere from 300 to 500 acres, which would be the amount of area that would be allow you to build above the Del Valle Reservoir Dam, or raise the level of the existing dam if we had owned the property, the operational level of the existing.
Well, what I can do is find out if the sellers would be interested in selling some property like that, but it would be a bit speculative to try to guess what land should be acquired based on a reservoir and a dam that hasn't been designed or developed.
It would be pure speculation to buy property.
We have a dam that is built, that we could raise the glory hole to 90,000 feet of storage.
We can't raise
that would
the glory
inundate
hole.
maybe 260 acres farther back. They mentioned 13,000. That's already built and constructed, and will give you additional operational capabilities. One of the reasons they lowered the level of the glory hole was they didn't want to flood the N3 ranch. Acquiring that land would be prudent, and it would give you the opportunity to fully utilize the existing dam with some modest modifications.
Well,
I'd like to chime in.
So staff hasn't evaluated that. I don't know about the glory hole elevation relative to the N3 ranch, but what I can do is ask the property owners if they're willing to sell a few hundred acres, and just get that information.
But may I suggest that even, it would be nice if they would go along with it. As a public entity with a public project, you have the eminent domain authority to acquire whatever portions you need, whether it be right-of-way or future reservoir site.
I got to chime in. If we buy the portion that would be inundated, we're going to be sitting on a piece of property for a very long time. There is no political will to build that dam, to raise that glory hole. It's just not there. San Francisco will go ahead and buy this because they don't care. They're going to do whatever the heck they want and tell the governor, we're doing it. And the governor's going to go, okay. He's the former mayor of San Francisco. He will go along with whatever they say. Us, your argument is great on paper. It makes all the sense in the world for water supply. It really does. But East Bay Regional Park doesn't support it. Without their support, it's not going to happen. DWR won't let it happen. The governor just cut the project, the Twin Tunnel project, just said, I don't care. One, we don't know what the liability for this is going to be. We don't know what the endangered species position is on this property is. The Vallecillos Channel right now, we have that one, and that's a liability.
And we should have spun
I
it
would
off and
love
had the extension.
to buy this property, personally. I think it would be fantastic to save it as open space. I would love to be able to get that watershed under control. But the cost, I just don't ever see, and I could be wrong, but the political will to build a dam there in the Bay Area, not going to happen. East Bay Regional Parks is not on board. Yes, physically as an engineer, you could raise the glory hole. Yes, physically as engineers, we could increase the size of the dam. We're thinking like engineers. The problem is the park district's going to go, no, and then the governor's going to go, no, and then we're sitting on property that what are we going to do with it? We have to explain that to the ratepayers, why we bought it. And to tell the ratepayers we bought it because we're going to build a dam there, they won't even support the dam or the cost to build the dam. So as much as I would love to buy this, I don't see an argument there because you got to take that away, that we're going to do this, we're going to raise the dam. We, Alameda County Water District, is not going to raise Del Val.
And raise a glory hole.
We are not going to do that. Not without East Bay Regional Park. And I don't care if they're just a tenant. When all they have to do is say, we want to increase that lease, and you know what's going to happen? DWR is going to say, yep.
In 50 years.
They're not going to come back to us and ask Alameda County Water District, do you guys want to have East Bay Regional Park here? No, East Bay Regional Park is going to go and say to DWR, we want this lease. And we just better hope they don't want to say, and we want to take the water people and make it even more strict. Because if they do, that's exactly what's going to happen. We don't have the power.
Politics change.
Could I put forward a point here? And I'm not saying that I'm right on it, but I'm just asking the question of all of us. I think we're making the wrong argument. I'm in agreement with President Gunther here about the potential for a dam and whatever we want to do with Lake Del Val. I think that there is a more global aspect to this, which I'm interested in, which is acquisition of the property for protection of the Alameda Creek watershed and open space and recreation. And I actually feel that the cost of doing this is not a really big expense, that I can go out to the community and I can actually sell this to the community on the ecosystem benefits and protection of the watershed. And we don't have to pay all cash up front. We can finance it. We can spread it out, the installment payments. Ask the seller if they're interested in like a 5-year installment payment plan. If we have a consortium, what's $25 million to this district to have this expanse of land protecting the watershed? We're spending all this money on Alameda Creek to get migratory fish coming back up into the upper watershed. This is part of that sale. And so I want us to look at the broader picture, not get stuck down in issues on one a dam or any proposed engineering things. If you're going to make that argument, it's going to take years. We need to move fast. This is seize the day and take advantage of what is available there and do it quickly before the wrong party gets control of that property.
You're not going to lose money acquiring land at what appears to be at a fairly modest cost. You think in terms in water, 50 to 100 years is well within a planning concept. We've identified future dams. Phelan went up to Hetch Hetchy and acquired the water rights of the valley. As a result, San Francisco has an extraordinary asset called the Hetch Hetchy water system as impacts the Bay Area. But it was the acquisition of the land and the rights that was done at first, and then they developed the program and the assets. This is an identified potential water resource that should not be lost. And tragically, given the politics of the area, having the Park District involved is essentially to lose it. There's a reason the Park District wasn't even allowed on the property when they were talking about the original acquisitions of Los Vaqueros, because they didn't want them to participate, and they haven't.
Director Weed, I'm in full agreement with you on those points. I need a break.
Let's go and take a break for Director Sethy, that's fine.
When
We can reconvene, what do you think, Paul, 5 minutes?
10 minutes.
10 minutes?
How about 8:30?
8:30.
and
8:30 will give us enough time.
7.1.
I think we've all, everybody back yet? Not quite. I think we've all kind of put our positions forward. And so what I'd like to do is the general manager's mentioned to me that he has a proposal he'd like to put before the board regarding this topic. So.
Sure. Thank you, President Gunther. So obviously, I'm trying to help the board direct me so that I can get you more information to help you come together as a board. And I think, as we've been talking about, there's some interim steps that make sense to do. For example, reach out to the property owner, right? No brainer. Reach out to DWR. We'll do that. See what their opinions about this, whether they might be interested in acquiring land in the watershed. It's a state water project issue to protect all of their watersheds. And then, excuse me?
For the expansion of Del Val.
No, the property acquisition would be watershed protection at this point. Asking DWR to expand Del Val, I will not get an answer on that.
No.
They won't be prepared to do that.
And you don't have 4 other supportive votes for that either.
A rationale for acquisition of property. Okay.
The rationale for the acquisition of property from DWR's perspective at this point, I think, would be watershed protection. And then we've been kind of kicking around this concept of a brainstorming session, something like that. My proposal is in sort of the thought that Director Sethy proposed. There's potential opportunities in that property in terms of, protecting the watershed, from a water purveyor perspective, or the land bank perspective. Open space and ecosystem is a little different. There's sort of direct water-related benefits, and then there's sort of, I guess you'd file that under sort of doing the right thing, protecting open space. So with that in mind, and trying to focus on really kind of the core water-related issues, I would propose sitting down with the general managers of Zone 7, Santa Clara Valley Water District, and Contra Costa Water District, because if the Los Vaqueros expansion project needs mitigation, to do some significant mitigation, this property perhaps could be part of that effort, and then it relates then to Los Vaqueros, and then maybe the other partners on the Los Vaqueros project might be interested in the acquisition. So that's something that I just thought of, but and then come back and report to the board on the outcome of that meeting.
Now, that's what I call thinking out of the box. That's good.
Well, we had a short break. It allowed me to go and collect my thoughts and think, how am I going to get out of this?
I had one other thought on the break, which was there are land management companies out there that we might want to just investigate if we wanted to, you know, kind of completely hand it off as an outside operation.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the realtors that's selling the property, he's up in Vacaville, might be.
Okay, I tell you what, I'll raise that issue when I sit down with the general managers first and see what the level of interest are among the agencies. And just because it did come up in terms of what the rate impact would be under different scenarios, for example, debt financing, finance staff was very nice to sort of anticipate that question too in advance. And debt finance project, you know, again, we've got our 3% base. So to get the debt payments up and going and operating costs and so forth, you're talking about an additional 3% for 2 years. And then we can go back to the 3% sort of base. So instead of, say, a 3.3 over a 2-year period, it would be a 6.6. And then you're acquiring a significant amount of debt. Our debt coverage would drop, though, and you've got other potential debt-funded, you know, sort of initiatives that are on your plate, including AMI, another large cost project that we haven't talked about this evening, and potentially, you know, indirectly through a JPA on Contra Costa. So that would be about the cost under that scenario. And again, it assumes about, you know, $2 to $3 million in operating and maintenance costs, and that's for the whole 80 square miles of land. So anyway, that's my proposal. Do some research with the property owner and DWR and sit down with the general managers of the 4 agencies, including ACWD. And if that's fine, then I'm happy to do that.
2 thumbs up here.
Okay. I will report back.
Okay, moving on, director's comments, reports. Director Sethy, I guess we could start with you, Paul, on the Association of California Water Agencies.
Okay.
Item 7.1.
If anybody wants to look up the very detailed agenda, they can just go to Aqua's website. Again, it's the most comprehensive water discussion in Aqua. I did put forward a proposal at the end of the meeting that was accepted by the committee to put on a separate breakout session at the Winter Aqua on focused on the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority, the Finance Authority, invite in both executive directors, members of DWR and the State Water Board were in attendance there, and they said they would participate as well. And so we had a number of players that Randy Record, who's our chair for the Finance Authority, said he might be interested in leading the discussion. So last week when we were at the Region 5 event, Dave Egerton, our executive director of Aqua, was in attendance all day, and he informed me that they were moving forward with that in their planning right now. So last year I got one of the sessions proposed here, and we had it at the Winter Aqua, so this is the second time around. Okay, this says Aqua here, but it was the California Data Collaborative, so that Director Weed and I attended. My purpose in going to this, as I have the past 3 years, this was the 4th annual, was really to come back with ideas on ways to make our district more efficient, save money, and maybe perhaps market ourselves better out to our community through community outreach programs. I found 3 of the sessions really exceptional. And by the way, this has grown now from 40 people the first year. What did we have? There were more than 260 people this time. So it's really grown in 4 years. And the maturity of the presentations has grown too. What was a lot of pie in the sky first and second year, they're really getting down to the brass knuckles here and presenting what they can do with the data, how it can be applied by water districts. I will only highlight one session. There was a very good marketing session, by the way, that I attended with Stephanie Nevins. But the one that I wanted to highlight, which was all new to me, was green bonds and environmental impact bonds, and what qualifies, and how in the future we can get our bonds, green bonds, certified for a nominal amount of money before we actually go to the marketplace. And in talking to the presenters, I was asking what the effective cost reduction is on the yield that you're paying on your bonds if you have the green certification. And they said generally it's 3 to 6 basis points. It can be as much as 10 or 12, depending upon the type of bond that's being issued, what it's covering. Yuba County Water District was one of the first to put forward a fairly large environmental impact bond, and they're allowed to spread the expenditure of that money over quite a lengthy period of time as well, not restricted to 3 years. So, Mr. Wunderlich, I was going to pass along some of the presentation materials in case we wish to go to market with a bond offering sometime in the near future.
Sure, I'd be happy to take a look at it, and we'll actually have an agenda item for Finance Committee next week where we'll be talking about potential debt options and strategies for the district. So.
Okay. And I also further asked questions about what is covered, because you can think naturally green, you get an image of certain kinds of projects. But that does include underground infrastructure, like our main replacement or main enhancement program. That can be covered under that too, in that it is building reliability into our infrastructure, and reliability is one of the real key components of obtaining the green bond certification. And it was very interesting to learn about this whole new industry that's been forming on Wall Street. This is like coming out of nowhere in the last 4 or 5 years, to offer all kinds of financing for utilities, whether it's electric, water, sanitary, all moving toward green programs, and they actually have international and national certification programs to certify who's doing this. And it was really very interesting. So I'll pull that into the finance meeting next week. I have a couple of quick things. Fremont Unified School District had their lead presentation of the lead in the schools last night with the district's report. So it was a clean bill of health for the district, with one school that had a little bit elevated lead at Ardenwood Elementary School kitchen. Number two, they voted last night to go to trustee ward elections beginning in 2020. So another government unit here moving in that direction. Still keeping a 5-member board. I have an article here which I circulated out to Mr. Shaver and Mr. Wunderlich. That was in the Mercury News yesterday about healthcare costs. I would suggest that if you have any interest, that you can go to the the sources there, look up the data. It's very presentable. USD, ACWD, and East Bay Mud were all clustered kind of in the middle. John, why don't you give the update for Alameda County Special Districts yesterday, but let me close with a couple of things here. I got blue tagged this week. So had to call in. I want to share my story. Had to call in and find out what was going on. Called into customer service and was treated very well by Lisa. She deserves the good housekeeping seal of approval right now, and she helped me out. I searched all over the place. I couldn't find a leak outdoors. Upstairs, I had no leaks and everything. I was looking under the counters everywhere. By coincidence, I had a plumber coming over to fix the drainage on a tub, and I have a downstairs residence which is rarely used except for family and relatives coming to visit, and there's a bathroom down there. When I went down to it, the fill valve had broken, and so the water was streaming into the tank and then straight out, and it was a pretty strong rush of water, which I never heard or anything. So my water bill last year was 19 units for the same billing period. Right now it's 55. About 3 times as much. So I'm going to be a much greater proponent of AMI. It's going to save me on the water bill. So I have a water district employee coming out to my home, I think tomorrow, and they're going to re-inspect the meter and make sure I've got that problem solved. And I just wanted to compliment customer service, especially Lisa, because she guided me through everything what I needed to do. Thank you.
Right,
And
well.
I'm very embarrassed that I ended up with one of these.
Well, thank you, and we'll be sure to pass that along, and she'll be happy to hear that.
Yeah. Okay. And lastly, I've been taking these brief vacations this summer, but I'm going to take another one from October 29th through about October 7th or 8th. I'll be back here for the next board meeting. Going to go up to Pinecrest Lake, drive up Highway 49 to Nevada City, where I will be one day at the Region 3 event. And then I'm going to take a highway I've never taken before, Highway 20, out of Nevada City through Emigrant Pass, where the Donner Party attempted to come through, and then later some members came through. Up to Truckee, stay at Donner Lake, and then come back. And I'm going to solo kayak across Pinecrest Lake, the length of it. That's my ambition this time around. That's it.
Okay, thank you. The California Water Summit, or Water Data Summit. I found the presentations to be uneven. There were some that were just bogged down with academic nonsense. But there were some interesting aspects. The bonds that Director Sethy was talking about appears to be a marketing issue, not a regulatory one. The people will pay more for debt if it has a green label. And the certification structure, again, appears in my mind to be somewhat suspect, that these are a group of individuals who've gotten together and self-certifying themselves that these are green projects. Doesn't appear that there's any particular industry standard on this. It's more a bond marketing effort to make people feel better when they loan money to various agencies and entities. But if it's money, it's money, and it's worth taking a look at it, and we might be able to the fact that underground infrastructure, et cetera, is included, I think, is an indication of how industry-driven this effort is. It's a marketing effort. The environmental merits are not obvious. It did have the advantage of being on a university campus, as have had the other water summit data. They started off at Stanford, and you get a different vibe and interest. I believe Director Sethy, there were very few elected directors at this meeting. It was nor even just general managers, but it was essentially a staff-driven, staff-level effort of people that are working with the data and making their pitches. I was disappointed that there was no one that really had what I thought were success stories as an agency in the use of their data. There was a lot of research and experimentation, but yet to be implemented in I thought, a cost-effective manner. But it's good to talk water, and picked up some ideas on the side, and it was well worth it. The next was the Smart Water Summit at Scottsdale. That was an industry-driven, paid for by industry, an opportunity to go there and talk to about over 40 vendors, and it was incredibly well organized. And you had an opportunity to deal with specific people on specific projects and programs. There were certain themes that are worth talking about. We were in a procurement, so I couldn't talk to the vendors about our issues related to our procurements, the AMI, but network security is important, and they're developing some very innovative efforts, going to the Department of Defense and coming up with ways, diodes that only feed one bit of information, and the real fear that water systems will be taken down. It was pointed about the Russians and to the Ukrainians, by getting into their SCADA system at an energy power plant, they gave the wrong data on the instruments, and the people tried to respond to that and basically self-sabotage their own system because of the false information being given through SCADA. It's a little harder in the water world to do that type of damage, but there are districts such as Goleta where they've cut off all communication to the real world, and they have a treatment plant and avoided any external communications for fear of that type of sabotage. For us, that would be a little more awkward. But it's a growing threat. There were areas on detection of water and water leaks. The acoustic methodologies are coming along. We're doing a pilot program of 50 acoustic connectors on fire hydrants. That's been expanded. There's a company now that develops an intelligent hydrant that has the acoustics built in. There was the award for innovation went to a company that did a augmented reality where they put on a hood tied to the GPS system, and you can walk around on the site and it will project where all the water lines are underground, assuming your GIS system is accurate, including the size of the pipes, where they cross, and generally the whole area. So rather than having to try and read off a a drawing or a map, you can get at least a sense of what's there and what the other utilities are. More in the area of technology, automated reporting, and the whole cast. So, interesting discussions. I've given some individual feedback. I'll be happy to, of course, sit down over the next week and sit down with individual and come back with some of the documentation I have and provide it to the staff. So that's my comments, and I wish you well. Thank you.
Any further requests or directors? If not, we'll go ahead then and adjourn to the closed session. At this point, I'd like to close us into closed session, and for pursuant to California Code Section 54956.9, Parent Delta, Parent 4, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, intention of litigation, one potential case. Closed session.
Okay. At, what is it, 8:54?
54. Okay.
For the air, carbon.
The time
concrete
is
replacement.
9:27. Board is back in session. From closed session, the board took no action.
Right. The board met in closed session pursuant to California Government Code Section 54956.9, subsection D4. Conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, initiation of litigation, one potential case, and the president said no action was taken in the closed session.
We did something, we just no action was taken.
No action was taken in closed session.
And with that, I will declare the meeting closed.